So actually, while we are talking and thinking about things, I'm going to go ahead and start the icebreaker. And what I like to know, and everyone can put your answers in the chat. How do you celebrate Black History Month? Are there any traditions that you have for Black History Month? Or if you're not African American, what things do you do during Black History Month to learn about Black history? We'd love to know as we're celebrating Black History Month now. And we can let people chime in, I think. You can just unmute yourself and chime in. Go quickly.
Hi, my name is Annette Bovey, and I teach fourth grade. And so Black History Month is kind of a big deal. And so I'm not African American, but I try to make sure that every day we try to incorporate either art or culture or just. I read somewhere like 4 years ago, please don't start with slavery and end with Martin Luther King. And I thought that was pretty brilliant. And so, and I realized that I've been really guilty of that earlier on. And so I really tried to work on that and to improve my teaching and craft on that. And I think I'm doing it better. And my students have been saying that this year, that we've learned so much this year. And
awesome.
So, and not to just have it be just February. So anyway.
Absolutely. So let's see, we have, let's see. Oh, they're going on.
What's wrong?
So let's go. Nona likes to learn something new each year about Black history, attending talks and reading articles. Erica celebrates by sharing African American heritage with food, dance, and music. Michael has lots of African vegan cuisine, concerts, reading shows, art shows. We have film watchers. Savita watches films from the Afro-diasporic filmmakers, which is awesome. I need to do that more myself. Yeah, very interesting. Nice. I love that people are looking into the breadth and widening their scope of what they do and what you teach others and what you share for Black History Month. And Roseanne says there's so much on air and online, much to choose from. Absolutely. There's
a magazine that AAA puts out called Journey.
Okay.
Then actually, I'm a AAA member, so they have an article about African American Arts Museum in Seattle and the history behind it. And it was fascinating for me because there was a lot of gentrification happening in that area, and they were trying to keep the culture, and I'm very interested in that. And because I myself have some buildings going up, I want to incorporate some of the art and stuff like that into the building. I started studying, and I was gotten very interested. I was, it was kind of link after link after link. I was just going in and reaching and reading about how that museum is connected to one of the secondary Smithsonian institution and all that good stuff. It's fascinating, So, that was good. Although I studied in Louisiana, so I am very much aware of what's going on.
Yes. I went to school in Louisiana, and thank you so much for taking the time to actually, to read up and honor that by including including our culture as you expand, in the community. So we'll get started. I'd first like to welcome everyone and thank you for attending Foundations for Building a Race Equity Plan. This is the first event in our 4-part series titled Structural Racism in the Arts. My name is Vanya Bynum, and I work at EastHUB on community engagement and outreach. I'm very excited to be a part of the effort to fully uplift all cultures that are represented in our communities. The groundbreaking work that we are doing here at EastHUB is relevant to the continued growth and development of the East Side and beyond. So before we continue, start the program, I'd first like to do our land acknowledgement. EastHUB acknowledges that we live and work on the unceded traditional land of the Coast Salish peoples, and that includes, but is not limited to, Snoqualmie, Suquamish, Duwamish, Nisqually, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot tribes. We appreciate and honor the original residents of this land and stand in solidarity with them against longstanding inequities and systemic oppression. We are committed to building enduring relationships and striving together to achieve just, equitable, and impactful change. We note that this kind of acknowledgement is not a new practice, but it is a traditional custom dating back centuries for many Native communities and nations. It is a powerful way of showing respect and honor and honoring the indigenous peoples of the land on which we work and live. Acknowledgement is just a simple way of resisting the erasure of indigenous histories and working toward honoring and inviting the truth. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce Sadishana Dixit, our Director of Cultural Connections.
Thank you, Venya, and hi everyone. Good evening and welcome to this workshop. I'm not going to take up too much of the time because I've met most of you know what EastHUB is about, so I'm going to keep it very brief. My name is Sudeshna Dixit and I'm the Director of Cultural Connections here at EastHUB. Before we begin, I just want to say that the East Side is home to many people from Ukraine. And I'm sure that I speak for all of us here that we are deeply concerned about the escalating conflict and the impact that this is having on its residents and its diaspora around the world. There's a lot of Ukrainian people that I know who are struggling to just understand what's going on here. And all of us at EastHUB, we all stand in solidarity with the people of Ukraine, and our thoughts are with them at this extremely difficult time. I would also like to acknowledge some elected officials who are here. Thank you, Bellevue Council Member Conrad Lee and John Stokes for attending. And we have more than 22 organizations being represented here today. So thank you all very much for being here and attending this first event in the 4 workshop series. A little bit about EastHUB. So EastHUB is a community development organization that's focused on building and expanding the arts and cultural infrastructure on the East Side. And our vision is to establish and celebrate the East Side as a unique cultural destination. And we not only want to activate spaces around the East Side, but we also want to have events and gatherings like this one, where we want to enable cross-cultural conversations and partnerships and bring forward interesting topics focused on arts and culture, specifically amplifying the voices of the East Side's BIPOC and other marginalized communities. And we hope to continue this series for a long time. And if you have any topics that you would like to talk about, please bring them to our attention and we would love to have an event around that. I'm also excited to announce that one of our new projects, which we worked with the City of Bellevue, and I see Laurie is in the audience today. It was launched yesterday. It's called eastsidelive.org. And it's a place where the community can go to explore a calendar dedicated to arts, culture, and heritage events on specifically around the East King County. And the calendar is completely free to use, and organizers are encouraged to join the roster and to submit their own events. And, you know, it's going to be a great place where people can just find out more about your organization and all the events that you're doing. And you'll find an FAQ section and other things in there just talking about how you can enter the events. And you can always reach out to us if there's an issue. And lastly, I'd just like to thank the City of Bellevue for the partnership that made this project possible. So I'm just going to paste the link in the chat. And that's my bit about EastHUB, and I'll hand it over back to Venya.
Okay, thank you, Sadishna. So as we celebrate and uplift Black history, we take this moment to acknowledge that it is through our history that we arrive in this space. understanding that the history of racism and systemic oppression of not only African Americans, but of other races as well, is ongoing American history. Through the Structural Racism series, we hope to be a part of a progressive space in history that changes the narrative and turns the tide toward equity. Before we move on to Michael's presentation, we would like to share with you a spoken word performance that so eloquently introduces today's topic.
Live this land of liberty where freedom seems far to most like us. When can I eat the fresh fruit I have labored to harvest for centuries? I am the dream, and I will fully inhabit the land of freedom while I am here. I will no longer eat in the kitchen when company comes. My glow will be broadcast on every station so we can all see the sun in us, reflect his light and spark freedom fire. Hope we all burn up in the fire of love. Let's give of ourselves, even when it seems we have nothing left. Let's link arms, heal, and destroy hate. Let's transform Lady Liberty into the land she promised to be. Like Martin dreamed, believe, and it will manifest. For we too are America.
Yes, thank you so much. We're so appreciative of those amazing artists and what they have brought. I thought that it just goes right in with what we are talking about. We are all a part of this. And I think through the work that we'll be doing tonight, we will start to manifest what we want to see. So now I will introduce our speaker, Michael J. Bobbitt. Michael Bobbitt is the Executive Director, Mass Council Cultural Art Leader, and EDI Consultant at EastHUB. Michael's guidelines and recommendations for reimagining anti-racist culture in the arts have been adopted by several organizations throughout the U.S. In addition to dedicating his life to arts leadership, Michael is a director, a choreographer, a playwright, and a performing artist. In today's workshop, Michael will lead the discussion as we investigate a shared understanding of racism, racist, and anti-racism and anti-racist. In addition, we will begin to understand the true need for racial equity plans and the obstacles that we may encounter while building and executing that plan. His ultimate goal is to stimulate actions and ideas. Welcome, Michael, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanya. It's really great to be here. It's really great to see so many faces here. I love that the artist that we just saw used the metaphor of eating and food, because I don't think there's anything better than food and art to bring us all together. And then the notion of believing and manifesting what you believe in is something that artists uniquely have. We spend all our lives training our brain to see the future and then bringing that to life. So it stands to reason that if we can see a world without racism, we are uniquely equipped, maybe more than anyone else on this planet, to actually get there. I want to tell you a little bit about myself that's not in my bio. I use the he series pronouns. I am a DEI consultant with EastHUB. My day job is the executive director of Mass Cultural Council, which is the highest ranking government official in arts and culture in the state of Massachusetts. I get to give away $35 million to arts and culture in Massachusetts every year. It's kind of a cool job. Anyone that has vision impairments, I'm a Black man with a shaved head and a closely cropped beard. I'm wearing a short sleeve blue shirt because I've been working on my arms and I want to show them off a little bit. I have been on this planet for 50 years, sponsored by Cocoa Butter. I was born and raised in DC, but now I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is the land of the Nipmuc, Wampanoag, and Massachusetts people. I started my theatrical career in the first grade when I was Hansel in the third act of Hansel and Gretel, which my mom said was the best act, and she has no biases. I studied theater and dance and music in the late 1900s, and then transitioned to teaching theater and dance and arts management. I am the newlywed to my husband, Steve, who is Jewish, and now I get Hanukkah presents, which is an extra bonus. We are the fathers of our 20-year-old son, Sang, who was adopted from Vietnam when he was 8 months old. In fact, today is the 20-year anniversary of his adoption. He is studying marine biology at the University of Florida. I'm also the brother of 7 siblings, and don't tell my siblings, but I'm pretty sure I'm the favorite child of Dorothy and James. My ancestry is predominantly Black, but descendants of white and indigenous ancestors. I only eat whole food plants, no meat, no dairy, no processed food or sugar. I am an Idris Elba stalker. I'm addicted to home improvement shows, and I aspire to be savage, classy, bougie, and ratchet. That's a little bit about me. I hope we can have a little bit of fun today, because even though these are difficult subject matters, we have to have a light heart about some of these things. So we're going to talk conceptually about anti-racism and how, and we'll take all those concepts, and hopefully I can use some robust metaphors to help you more deeply embed some of these concepts into your day-to-day practice. But then we're going to get granular. We're actually going to talk about some tactics and some action steps you might want to consider, or how you can ideate and come up with your own action steps. So here's our agenda. We're going to look at some group agreements. We will talk specifically about what is racism, who is a racist. We'll talk about what is anti-racism, and how do we become anti-racists. We will talk about why it's important to build a race equity plan for your organizations. And then we'll talk about the obstacles to building that plan, the things you're going to have to think about, the people you're working with are going to have to think about. I'll give you some tools that I've used before in helping organizations build their plan. And then we'll end up with some next steps. And throughout the presentation, please feel free to either unmute and interrupt with a question, or put something in the chat. I think Bernardo and Sudishna are going to be monitoring the chat in case there are questions that come up. But with the slideshow, I can't often see you, so feel free to just unmute and pop in there. Any questions about the agenda? All right, moving on. Group agreements. The first one is anti-racism is an act of love. We're trying to show love to people that have never been loved by this country. I think we can also include in that diversity, inclusion, equity, anti-oppression, anti-discrimination, all those words, they're all acts of love. I hope that inspires you to stay in this conversation and fight for loving people that deserve to be loved. Choose love over anxiety. If we are focusing on the love that we're trying to show people that have never been loved, then our anxiety should take second place. It should not be the priority. Sometimes when we're making changes, we think about all the things we're going to lose, or we imagine all these things that are going to happen. And what we want to do is focus on supporting and helping those people that we're trying to show love to. A brave space is better than a safe space. This is a brave space, in that we should feel free to say the things that we need and want to say. We cannot heal unless we name it. And sometimes the idea of a safe space can be co-opted, and it allows people to say things that may be harmful. If that happens, we'll just take the time to acknowledge it. It doesn't have to be a big deal. Hopefully the person that said something maybe that was harmful will just apologize, and we'll all work on repairing it and moving on and learning from that. Learning starts where knowledge ends. I'm assuming you're here because you want to learn something new, that the things you know maybe aren't helping you or you've gotten to a certain place. And I want to come here and learn some more. I added that when I came up here to Massachusetts because this is they call it a meds and eds state, all about medicine and education. So I live in Cambridge. So on one end of my town is Harvard, on the other end is MIT. So I'm in rooms with lots of very, very smart people that sometimes don't feel like they have anything to learn. Lived experience trumps intellect. So to support that, the people that have the lived experience are the ones we should follow and listen to. They are the experts. They live this every single day. And so the things you may have learned or heard should not trump the lived experience of those people that are experiencing every day. Embrace discomfort. We're going to have some uncomfortable moments here today. I don't think anyone in this country deserves the right to be comfortable in conversations around race because we have all kind of sucked at this thing, right? I don't think anyone has nailed this. And so it's going to be uncomfortable. So embrace it. It's part of what we're here for. Listening opens hearts and minds. Sometimes, you know, the belief system that we have all been indoctrinated into in this country is deeply embedded and it's been fine-tuned. And changing the belief system for most people will take 10 to 15 years. And one of the ways to combat that is to just listen. Just listen. Sometimes I like to share with people, use the acronym WAIT, which stands for Why Am I Talking? And for some people, use the term WASTE, which means why am I still talking? Sometimes just listening is a really good thing. One of the things that happens in racial equity work is some people just spend a lot of time educating themselves. That's one of their action steps. They educate, they learn, they read, they go to workshops, and yet they haven't quite stepped into action. So one of the things I share with people is that every time you're in a conversation or a workshop, or you finish reading something about racial equity, commit to one action. If we all did that, if all 36 of us did that, that would be 36 actions towards ending racism. Any questions or thoughts about the group agreements? All right, well, hearing none, let's define what is racism. Can I have a volunteer to read this first line? You want to pop off screen and just read? Pop off mute.
My name is Jennifer. I'm happy to read it. The belief and idea that one race is superior and therefore deserves more and has the right to dominate other races. And?
Great. So our artist talked about belief and how beliefs can manifest themselves, right? And the idea, what I love about the idea is that, especially in this room, I'm talking to a group of people that love the arts. So it's just a belief and it's an idea. And it's what we do with the belief and what we do with the ideas that becomes the problem. So racism is an idea. It's a creative tool. Moving forward. Someone want to read the second one?
Hi, this is Nina. I can read it. And it's a system, structure, and an institution that favors members of one race while discriminating against or harming members of another race, ultimately serving to preserve the social status, economic advantage, or political power of the dominant race.
Right. So the belief in the idea is not so bad. It's when it becomes institutionalized or systemized or structured that becomes bad. And this name is going to come up a couple of times today. The idea, we don't like the idea. We don't like the idea of someone thinking they're better than someone else, but it's when it becomes a system, a structure, and an institution. And if we can sort of hold on to that part of it, then we can make some sense of how some people don't feel that they benefit from those structures, and they're learning now that maybe they do. I won't belabor this because we're going to talk about this more and more and more. There are three components to racism. The first is prejudice. The second is social power. And the third is legal authority. Prejudice, social power, and legal authority. So what's interesting about this is that there's only one group of people in the whole US, and we're talking about US racism at the moment, that has all three of those, that has the prejudice as a group, the social power, and the legal authority to enact systems and structures and institutions to oppress other groups of people. So Middle Eastern people can't oppress Asian people in this country, and Latinx people can't oppress Black people. There's only one group, only white people have the social power and the legal authority to create laws to oppress other people. So there are a couple of things. One is that there's no such thing as reverse racism. It's a myth. It doesn't exist. Because a person of color does not have the social power or the legal authority to enact laws to oppress other people. They can be prejudiced. They can make derogatory statements. They can be bigots. They can be assholes. But they don't have the social power and the legal authority to enact laws to oppress other groups of people. That also means there's no such thing as not racist. People of color don't benefit from the system, the structure, and the institution of racism, so they can't be considered racist. And white people, many philosophies believe that white people in this country can't not benefit from the system, the structures, and the institutions. So good white people that like people of color, that are fighting for people of color, still benefit from the system, the structure, and the institution. Is that sort of making sense for everyone? One of those uncomfortable moments?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So what happens when you see a slide like this? This was developed by Robin DiAngelo, who created the controversial book, White Fragility. Does this seem familiar? Anyone that's lived in this country that was born prior to the 1980s or 90s? Does this look familiar? Do I have any comments about this slide?
I've actually never seen this before, so I think this is really interesting.
Did these seem familiar from what you've learned and grew up with?
Yes, the idea of it and the words, yes, I've just never seen it in this format, or in this known attributing it to a person.
Right. After the Civil War, which was about maintaining the institution of slavery, people that didn't want to be associated with that, one, because they lost, started rewriting history to say that it was about fighting for states' rights to do whatever they wanted to do, not about enslavement. It was all based on progressiveness and open-mindedness and being like, this is state law. People that were bad and racist wore pointy hats and burned crosses. Not people that were making laws. Anyone else have any comments or thoughts about this slide?
I think this completely resonates with me. I'm from Ohio. My family's from Athens, Alabama on my mom's side. So this is my depiction of this resonates with me completely.
Yeah, but it's not binary, is it?
Yeah.
Not at all. One of the things I say when I do this workshop in Massachusetts, that one, the first slave ship was designed and built in Massachusetts. Most generational wealth in Massachusetts came directly from the slave industry. There were lots of enslaved people in Massachusetts. So it's not a northern southern thing. It's not an old young thing. So if we understand what racism is, now we have to define what anti-racism is. So if we understand what racism is, and we know that there's no such thing as not racist or reverse racism, right? Then what is anti-racism? Can someone read this for me?
Sure, this is Mitch Smith. Anti-racism refers to a form of action against racial hatred, bias, systemic racism, and the oppression of specific groups.
Yeah, so the operative word in this line is action. You are doing something. It's not about, again, we got away from words like belief and idea, although ideation is a good part of this. But it's not about the belief, it's about actions. And many of us, especially our organizations, get stuck in the belief of it and not actions. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Ibram X. Kendi, who's probably our foremost thought leader on this work right now, he says the heartbeat of anti-racism is confession, self-reflection, and seeking to grow change. He kind of lays it out there. Here's the plan to become anti-racist. An anti-racist is one who is supporting an anti-racist policy through their actions, there's that word again, and expressing anti-racist ideas. We talked about racism being about beliefs and ideas and the creativity behind the ideas. For example, right now we're dealing with louder voter suppression laws. That is some people sitting around creating ideas to oppress other people from voting. And then they had the legal authority and the social power to turn those into laws. So it stands to reason if racism is a creative tool, then anti-racism is also a creative tool. In fact, we have to be more creative as anti-racists because we have a 400-year head start. I always think of two houses. One is this house of racism built on little racist idea bricks that were just built and built and built and built and built. Well, we have to tear that house down brick by brick. At the same time, and really quickly, we have to build an anti-racist house out of anti-racist ideas. Those who made the rules have the power, the social power, and the legal authority to change the rules. Those who made the rules have the social power and legal authority to change the rules. Right? Women's right to vote. It wasn't women that changed those laws. They weren't in power. It was men. Gays' right to marriage. The people in power had the social power and the legal authority to change the rules. So those of you that are on boards of directors, or those of you that are leading organizations, you may have the social power and the legal authority to change the rules in your organization. But you want to go back up here to this idea of confession, self-reflection, and change. So usually people don't have a hard time getting to confession. Yes, I confess that I'm a white person in this country. I benefit from these invisible privileges that have been handed to me because of the systems, the structures, and the institutions that came from ideology. I do. So most people can get there. And then self-reflection, which also is about education, most people can dig into education. They get on Google, they go to workshops, they look at YouTube clips, they listen to podcasts, they're educating themselves. And then seeking to grow change. Change is the hard part. And I'm not talking about hearts and minds change. I'm talking about how do we use our privileges and what we've learned to decenter ourselves, to step aside and let someone else have an opportunity, to use our power to make sure we are changing the policies to take care of the people that need it the most and people that have been unloved for a long time. The change, the last thing is the hardest part about ending this thing that we made up. Questions or comments about this slide? All right. Oh, there it is right there. Those are the 3 things it requires to end it. We can do it. All right, so why build a racial equity plan? Racial equity plans are the right things to do. There's public outrage, there's executive orders, it's time, humans designed this thing and we can end it. It's a series of love actions that demonstrate confession, decentering, and education, which we just talked about, and it helps to rebuild trust for BIPOCs. So one of the ways I like to explain this, is there anyone here that has ever been cheated on before? Right? If you've been cheated on before, you become hyper vigilant, right? You want to know where you've been, where you going, what time are you going to get home? Let me see your phone. Why are you texting him? Why are you talking to her? Let me see your email. That person can say to you, honey, I will never cheat again. Trust me. They can say it 1,000,000 times. It doesn't mean anything until their actions prove that they will never cheat again. Right? And so when our organizations or our people come out with solidarity statements, or they wear t-shirts that say Black Lives Matter, doesn't mean anything if there's no action behind it, right? It's the same thing. So one of the things I love is that as the gay man, I know a place is safe because there's a rainbow flag somewhere. So I know I can walk into that space and feel relatively safe because those people may have done the work. We don't have those kinds of markers as people of color. We only have your actions. We only have the things that you've done. My husband will sometimes say, let's go to blah, 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 Vermont for a little weekend getaway. The first thing I do is get on Google and look up racism in blah, 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 Vermont. I want to know what's going down in those places, what the culture is like, or will I feel safe there? Believe me when I tell you, people of color are looking at your organizations to find out what you've done to make sure they feel safe. And so if you build a racial equity plan, a document that is somehow publicly posted, it's a sign to them that you are really doing the work. You're doing the actions. You're not just holding on to a belief. It helps us move towards ending this race war. Some people say we're starting a race war. We didn't start this thing. We don't benefit from it. People of color don't want to talk about racism. We want it to be over. We have no desire to get revenge on white people. We just want to have equity and equality and the same benefits. Censors the most marginalized, thereby benefiting everyone. So when you're building your plans, you're going to think about the actions that you're taking that are specifically about people of color, how to take care of them. So if you think about it, if marginalization is down here and privilege is up here, if we build our actions to support these people versus these people, then the gap between privilege and marginalization grows. If we center these people, then the gap closes. And once the gap closes, everyone will benefit. Because when oppression exists, no one is free. For example, we're all here at this workshop, right? It takes actions towards correcting a 400-year head start. I'm going to ask you all to play a fictional game with me. We're going to play Monopoly. You're all in for this game of Monopoly? Let me see some thumbs up reactions. All right. So, oh, you know what? I just heard that because I have brown skin, I am better than white people. I had it proven with religion and science. And so everyone that has brown skin, we are all better than white people. And because of that, we get to play the game of Monopoly for 2 hours first. How about it? Erica, you ready? We get to play 2 hours first.
No, thanks.
No, you don't want to play 2 hours first? Nina, you ready? You ready, Nina?
Yeah.
What you buying?
Everything.
Everything? You got all the boardwalk with some motels and some hotels?
Everything.
Everything. Who else? What you buying? Councilmember Lee, what you buying? Sudishna, what you got?
Everything. I'm going to compete with Nina.
You're buying it all. Jay, you got a whole 2 sides filled up. You got money in the bank. Vanya, you got enough money to take care of 8, 9, 10 generations of your family? All right, well, we have bought everything, and now 2 hours have passed. Okay, white people, you can join the game now. Can you win this game? White people, you don't think you can win? Well, if you work hard, maybe you can win. Is that right? I don't think so. How about we teach you our ways, go to our schools, and learn our ways of playing the game? Is that gonna help? What if we gave you grants? Have we fixed the problem? I mean, for real, that thing that we did 2 hours ago was a long time ago. It's not happening anymore. You're all in the game now. So in that instance, where people that have brown skin got a 2 hours head start, whose job is it to fix it? What do we think? Is it the people that made the rules? Probably. But like Nina, they're asking us to give up our stuff. I don't know if I want to give up my stuff.
I mean, maybe if they ask nicely, I'll think about it.
Okay.
But ew.
Yeah. I mean, like I got those 9 generations of people to take care of. I can't like, I've never met them, but I still want to take care of them. So in that instance, my friends, I don't know if we can rely on the goodwill of a few good people. Maybe it's policy and the lawmakers that have to enforce these things. They have to create equity. They have to create laws that take the people that got 2 hours of a late start and advantages them so we can all get on the same page. Does that make sense? I mean, that game is a good metaphor. If you're having difficult conversations with people, use that. We're not going to talk about the fact that the game of Monopoly wasn't ours in the first place, but that is the truth. So use that if you need to. All right. Any questions about why it's important to build a racial equity plan?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I understand that it's really important to build an equity plan, but how do you show accountability, or how do people see your accountability? How do they measure it? Because it could just be a box that's checked and people move on. We have a plan, but we're not implementing it. Doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. So to me, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, that when you build your action steps, that they want to be measurable and have a time based on it. And once you build those action plans with measurements and timestamps, I think the plan should be published on all your platforms. I also think you should create some sort of tracking sheet to make sure you are staying in track with your stated actions, and then you should report it to your constituents at least once a quarter, and then update it annually. But when I go over like the actual process of building the plans, we're going to do that. The last thing I want to say is that it's good for business, my friends. It's good for business. If you're running an arts organization, this is good. It's good for all kinds of business. I did a workshop with the parent company of a car distributor. They had about 100 different dealerships up and down the East Coast. And when I walked into the room, the suite, not surprisingly, was middle-aged white guys. The whole C-suite was middle-aged white guys. And the first thing I said was, "Oh my, you're leaving so much money on the table." And they were like, "What are you talking about? Our projections for next quarter are through the roof." And I was like, "You know how to sell cars to white people. You have no idea how to sell cars to people of color because of the way you designed this room. So I promise you, you are leaving money on the table." One of the things we know about people of color, if you ask someone, say, "Hey, tell me a little bit about you and your culture." Art and culture is inherent in the things they use to describe who they are. The music, the fashion, In some Native American cultures, there's not even a word for art because it doesn't make sense that it's separate. It's baked into the pottery and the clothing and the ritual and the day-to-day activity. So if you want to grow your audiences, there's where you have some market. There's where your massive growth can happen. The last organization I ran, a small theater company, I walked in, had $500,000 in debt. In 8 months, I wiped out the $500,000 in debt and put $500,000 in reserve because we focused on marketing and programming and building relationships with people of color primarily. All right, here's some of the obstacles we're going to encounter. Fear of loss, not change. It is loss that people are upset about. And half of it's in their head. It's not a reality. We change all the time. We get a notification that our iPhone operating system is going to update. And we're like, oh, I hate you, iPhone. And then the next day we're over it, right? It's loss. So when people are upset about the changes you're making, get to what they fear they're losing. Get them to write it out and talk it out. We get stuck in educating. We talked about this. I mean, really, to learn everything you need to learn about racism, it would require 4 PhDs. So we choose anxiety over love. We think about the people that might be upset more than the people we're trying to show love to. I say to this, if you're going towards that anti-racism city on the train, if there's someone on the train that's struggling with something, invite them off the train, right? Let them take time to get comfortable, to do whatever they need to do to learn, to catch up, and then they can come back on the train, but we don't slow the train down for them. Fear of pioneering. Pioneering is inherently dangerous. But if racism is based on ideas and creative ideas, we need creative ideas that are anti-racist. And we have to have more ideas faster. And I'll share some of the ideas that I've used in the past. Predominantly white institutions and homogeneity. This is an obstacle for building a race equity plan. So one of the things that we all need to embrace is that predominantly white institutions were designed to be that way. It did not happen by accident. I'm not suggesting that it was done out of some ill intentions, but it was designed, the business model was designed by white people for white people. So if we want to have multicultural organizations, the people designing or redesigning the business model have to be people of color. You can't diversify without people of color in positions of making decisions. And those people of color have to design business models for people of color or for multicultural audiences. So you have to go back to like, who's in the room making the decisions about how we do our business? It also, so one of the ways that laws or policies or decisions exist, they exist on a bell curve. The idea is to take care of most of the people at the center of the bell curve. Knowing that on the ends of the bell curve, someone's going to get screwed because it's hard to make a policy that takes care of everyone. The problem that we have in this country is that most decision-making bodies are homogenous, right? It's the same group of people. And so because the perspective is in the room, they actually make decisions that look like this, where the decisions are being made to take care of the people that look like them, right? That law is taking care of the people that look like them, and the people that don't look like them are getting the low end of the stick. That policymaking body has two decisions. It can become fiercely anti-oppression, and then they make laws that exist like this, where these people we don't worry about because they have the resources to get what they need elsewhere, and we're making policies to take care of these people who need it the most. Or what's easier and better, because even when you do that, that homogeneous decision-making body still doesn't have perspective. You need to diversify that decision-making body with enough people in that decision-making body to affect the votes. Can't have 10 white people and then 2 people of color and expect those 2 people of color to be able to influence the other 8 people. It needs to be enough people to affect the vote. Right? That makes sense? Prime example of this is about 5 years ago, there was a photo of the Congressional Committee on Women's Reproductive Issues. Did you all see that photo? It was all white men making laws about women's bodies. What the hell do they know? Imagine them bringing one woman into that committee. Is she going to get anything done? The only way is for them to cede their decisions to her, to change, to decenter their maleness and listen to her. But are they going to do that? Probably not. Monolithic plans. So I think that one of the mistakes we make is that we build these DEI plans. We take all the forms of oppression and we try to stick them into one plan, as if your disability plan has the same action step as your race equity plan, or your gender equity plan, or your sexuality plan. Those are different actions that all deserve their own plan. And one of the things that happens when we build DEI plans is that race gets pushed to the bottom because it's the hardest thing to deal with. I suggest we pull it to the top and focus primarily and first on a race equity plan. That race equity plan will be the blueprint for all the other plans. And each plan has its own, each oppression has its own plan for eradicating. So you have a suite of plans, not one plan. Stepping into the room uninformed, some people just don't do their homework and they come in the room and they fight for the things they know versus having learned some stuff. Sometimes we focus on policies and programs rather than a cultural shift. Sometimes we will do like discount tickets to attract people of color. Discount tickets are not going to fix your race problem. But we'll do an outreach program. Outreach programs are not going to fix your racism problem. Or we'll hire a person of color to be the chief diversity officer. It's not going to fix your race problem. You have to go back. It's like a wall where you discover mold on the wall. You can't just pull out a can of paint and paint over the mold because the mold's going to reappear again. You got to rip that wall apart, find out where the mold is coming from, fix that, and then put it back together. So all of your actions need to focus on a shift to culture, a culture that says racism and racists are not allowed in our organization. I don't care how much money they donate, how long they've been a subscriber. If they are not on the same page with you when it comes to anti-racism, then you have to say goodbye. Policies won't fix it by itself. If that was the case, then affirmative action would have fixed racism. Well, the 1968 Civil Rights Movement, Civil Rights Act would have fixed racism. They didn't address the culture that still allows that behavior to exist. Toxic intellectualism, we talked about. Progressive liberals with conditions, good white people. And then collective violence. So we all know what physical violence is, and that's used to oppress people. Right? Collective violence can happen in a number of ways. It can happen where a board doesn't put anti-racism on the conversation, on the agenda, or something comes up in the board and they're like, it's not on the agenda. Or one person says something that harms a person of color, that person of color calls them out, that person feels like they're being attacked. So then they talk to their other friend and their other friend and their other friend and their other friend. And now there's 6 people ganging up on the person of color who said, hey, something you did harmed me. And now they're saying, you called me racist. Don't ever call them racist. It's like that middle school thing that we do. But collective violence can have a lot of impact. You have to be aware of that. And then lastly, allyship. Allyship for me is a way to absolve yourself from doing something. I have so many allies. I don't need any more. I'm going to give them away like Oprah's favorite things. And the reason why I say that is because I've been in a room where someone says something racist or homophobic and none of my allies stepped up to do anything. Allies are people that have a belief, but maybe they aren't doing anything. So I like to bring back accomplice, or even better yet, let's bring back abolitionist. Let's start trending that. That's what we need. All right, the 4 eyes of oppression. I won't spend too much time on that, but the first one we talked about is the ideology, right? The idea that one group of people is better than another group of people. So I use ballet. One of the ideas in ballet is that ballet is the best form of dance, right? The person who first said that probably never saw any other form of dance, but ballet is the best, right? And they were able to sell that idea and built up some collection around that. And then because this form started in Europe, they said that white bodies are the only bodies that can execute ballet. And because it became this high art form, it's only for the elite. That ideology then gets institutionalized, right? So we talked about this earlier. So there's only one body type that's acceptable in ballet. That you have to do 20 years, 15 years of training. That the best ballets are the ones that feature white characters choreographed by white men. To get well funded. In New York City, there's 2 ballet companies on the same block. The same block. Then it becomes interpersonal. Well, one group of people that is in the dominant culture is oppressing or saying bad things about the other group of people. So the straight people are making bad comments about gay people. Non-ballet trained dancers are not good or real dancers. Thicker bodies can't do ballet. And then the ultimate oppression is interpersonal. And what's interesting about internalized. And what's interesting about internalized is that the oppressor doesn't have to do anything anymore because the oppressed are oppressing themselves. They have internalized what they have been told and heard and felt, that they oppress themselves. You see this happening sometimes in the corporate world where there are 3 people of color in a largely white business that don't get along because they know that only one of them might get promoted. So they oppress each other. And so when I was training to be a ballet dancer, I was tall, I was thicker, and I was like, oh, I don't have the right body type, so I can't be a ballet dancer. So we see how ideology can sort of go all the way down to internalized oppression. Something to be aware of. In your organizations, you might want to do this exercise with your teams. Think about what art form you're doing and where are the ideologies that come in that oppress people, and figure out how you can track all that. Any questions on that before we get into some of the more practical things?
Michael, I had a kind of a theory question. I'm very interested in unpacking and dealing with what internalized oppression means and looks like. I feel like that is the work of BIPOC folks.
Yep.
And so when thinking about building a race equity plan, is there room to build in that plan the care for those BIPOC staff members who are themselves wrestling with these internalizations? Like in your corporate example, that was me in college in my very tiny, predominantly white theater program. And I remember feeling aggressive towards one of the other few Black people in the program because we were both the funny, larger Black women, and there could only be one.
Right.
And so how do we make room for the care, the nurturing, the dismantling of that internalized oppression within BIPOC folks that are in these either predominantly white institutions or either culturally specific institutions that are still in the same system, that scarcity mentality, fighting for limited resources. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, you named it. In your action plan, you want to actually list as an action, we create spaces for BIPOC people to work on all the things that BIPOC people should be working on in the racial equity world. In the racial equity training area, most of that work has been focused on getting white people on the page. We're now starting to see people shift to taking care of BIPOC people. And the work that we should be doing is like understanding racialized trauma, understanding colorism, understanding internalized racism, understanding what radical self-care looks like. All that stuff is the work that we should be doing, but your organizations can actually support that. They can create a workshop, an hour a month for the BIPOC people in your organization. They can provide them with a coach that can come in and work with them. They can give them readings and workshops. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do, but that can be part of your racial equity plan. Any other questions on that? All right, here's the super nuts of it. So this framework was designed by Of, By, For, All. It's a framework for response in moments of outrage and crisis, which I think we're all in, right? So they put it in 4 quadrants. There's internal action, those things that are immediate and longer term, and then the external actions, which are immediate and longer term. And then I broke it down into bullets. Because I think in our organizations, the center on where most racism lives is in the governance and the board of organizations. That's like the longest lasting institution of those organizations. So like you can create action steps that are just specifically about the governance of the organization. And then secondly, the operations of an organization, because that's where the second largest list of racism exists. And then programming. And then do not forget your audiences. You have to train your audiences to become anti-racist as well. You have to. So this framework makes sense, everyone? Because we'll come back to that in a second. But there are 4 quadrants. External, immediate. What are you doing externally that's immediate? And what are you doing externally that's longer term? What are you doing internally that's immediate? And what are you doing internally that's longer term? One of the ways you can collect these ideas and these actions is create a spreadsheet with a tab for governance and board, a tab for operations, a tab for programming, and a tab for audience. And then send that out to all your internal people, your staff. You can have a group of artists, your board members, and have them populate those spreadsheets with ideas, just with ideas. And those ideas can be things like 50% of our board will be people of color. In operations, we're going to create a racism incident report so we can track all the racist things that happen in our organization. Programming wise, 50% of our programs will feature people of color. Audiences, we're going to create a audience anti-racist agreements that audience members have to click at the point of purchase. So before they can finish buying their tickets, they have to click a button that says, I agree to the audience anti-racist agreements. Right? Doesn't mean you're going to stop them from being an asshole when they come to the audience, but at very least you can say, here's the culture of our organization when you're purchasing your tickets. All right, we'll come back to that. Okay, the anti-racist idea gathering. So if we were to do this, so if we had a spreadsheet, here's some of the things you can populate the spreadsheet with. You can say 50% of the board is BIPOC, create an anti-racism committee or a DEI committee, but give them veto power. Give them veto power over things that have a racist connotation. Because if not, if you create a DEI committee and they don't have any power, that's like relegating them to the kiddie table at Thanksgiving. It can be performative. But if they have veto power, then your full board's going to think twice about the things they're voting on. Make sure anti-racism is on every agenda. All board members have to complete an anti-racism orientation. Add advancing racial equity to board descriptions and board job descriptions and evaluations. Revise all governing documents from an anti-racism lens. All committees have 50% BIPOC representation and a BIPOC co-chair. Those are just some ideas. What are a couple of other ideas you can think of from a governance perspective? Anything? Bueller? You don't have to think of it now. But anyway,
all board members. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Hi, this is Lydia. All board members have to sign an anti-racism agreement when they join the board, and it gets re-signed annually.
Love that. Love that.
Make board giving optional.
Love that. So when you send this spreadsheet out to your board members, one, have your board members focus on the board stuff because they'll have tons of ideas about programming, right? But make sure they focus on the board stuff and just let them free think. Or you can do it in a room with big old sticky notes or do it in a Zoom. You just want ideas, right? Creative ideas. Then if we start thinking about operations, here's a few to get your juices going. Revise all job descriptions from an anti-racism lens. Lead with your anti-racism statement in your job descriptions, my friends. Lead with it. Put it first. Put it above your mission and vision. If you're a white presenting organization, brown people are not going to look to the bottom of that job description before they apply. You put it at the top, they will know you mean it. So lead with it. Add advancing racial equity to the job description and evaluation so that when you have your evaluation, you say to that staff person, what have you done to advance racial equity in this organization? If they haven't done anything, that may reflect negatively on their evaluation. Revise all handbooks. Look at your HR policies. Include equitable pay and benefits. Build a racism incident report. Strive for 50% of your BIPOC your staff being BIPOC. A couple of other ideas from an operations standpoint. Nina, you had one.
I did.
Yeah, build regular affinity spaces for BIPOC people to heal.
Yeah, that brilliant idea.
That's a great idea. Create affinity spaces. Other ideas you can do operationally? Make sure half of your marketing materials features the faces of BIPOC people. There's tons of things you can do from a marketing sort of relationship building place. But anyway, you want, again, to think about ideas and let your whole staff participate in this. One thing I will say is that when you talk to your staff about this, really think about actions. They're going to come up with things that are beliefs and not actions. When they come up with the belief statements, you have to say, so what does that look like in action? How do we turn, what are we doing with that?
Before we do that, there's a comment from Judith, and she says that deconstruct all benefits and examine for equity, example, holidays, anything offered up for examination.
Love that. Love that. Unlimited vacation for arts organizations works really well. I'm just saying.
I would also like to add that when you're posting jobs, make sure you post them in the right places, because you might all be about trying to get the right person, but if you're not posting it in the right place, you're not probably going to find them.
Yep. Programming, center BIPOC artists, adding BIPOC artists. I don't know, I think I may have missed some stuff on this, but what ideas do you have programming wise?
Offering translation services.
Mm-hmm. That might be for audiences too. Yeah. We're doing this at my grant making agency. We found software that translates everything automatically. We found a Zoom room where all of us can be speaking different languages, and with the click of a button, it translates in real time. What? It's called Kudo, K-U-D-O. Designed by people that work at the UN. It's really awesome. So tons of things that can happen programming. This is where you want to really involve your artists too in this. And then audience-wise, publicly, yes, publish the artist rates and expectations. Audience-wise, build robust community engagement plans. Make sure all staff is participating in that. Hire staff to support just the outreach and the relationship building. Revise all your marketing practices to include building BIPOC relationships. I mean, small things like today I was approving a radio ad, and the language that we wanted to use in the ad, I didn't think was going to reach the ears that we needed it to reach. So we talked to our BIPOC staff and they gave us feedback. And then when we talked to the radio station, we said, we really want a BIPOC voice to read these words. We really want that. So all these kinds of things. So again, you can build a spreadsheet that has tabs. You can send it out in a Google link and say, everyone, please populate this with all the ideas. We want 200 ideas, right? And once you have that, then you want to start galvanizing the things that are similar. You want to put them into and turn them into SMART outcome goals. So make sure they're very specific. So again, we want to get away from beliefs. We want to say, here's what we are doing. It's super specific. And then there's a measurable. A measurable can be getting the thing done. So like if you're building a racism incident report, the measurable is we got it done. Another measurable could be 50% of our board will be people of color. And with that, you don't elect non-people of color until you get to 50% people of color. And once you get there, you start thinking about what are the kinds of questions that we're going to ask white people that we're electing to our anti-racist organization. It could be some of the things you add to your interview questions, like, tell me about the significant relationships you have with people of color. And if you don't believe them, maybe you ask them to open up their photo app on their phone and show you, right? Because if we're an anti-racist organization, we should not be bringing people in our organization that don't have relationships with people of color. Right? So measurable, they want to be measurable. And then they want to be attainable. And sometimes I use the word aggressive because there's a 400-year, really, if we talk about decolonization, there's a 600-year head start. So they shouldn't be like timid. So 50% of people of color by fall of 22 is aggressive. That means we got 6 months to get there, but we should try. It should be relevant to what we're talking about, and they should be time-based. So that fall of 22 is the time base. By end of this year, we're going to have done this. By mid next year, we're going to have done this. So you're going to make them SMART outcome goals. And you can look up SMART outcome goals on Google to give you more detail about this. Any question on that? Just to clarify a little bit, an outcome, I want to clarify this with the teams you're working with, is what are you able to see, hear, or measure after you've taken some series of actions, action, or made some sort of intervention. The key questions you want to be able to answer is what will actually occur? What does success look like? How will I and others know we have achieved it? The other thing you want to do is start thinking about how the SMART outcome action goals, action steps are going to change the culture. So when you say something like 50% of our board is going to be people of color by end of fall 2022. The cultural shift is, because that can just be a performative gesture, right? If you want to change the culture, you have to say something like, to make sure that we have the perspectives in the room in all of our governance, at least 50% of our board will be people of color by fall of 22. So the shift in culture is to making sure that our perspective is inclusive and diverse, because we want a culture of inclusivity and diverse. So in a culture, just to talk about culture, it's the customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of a racial, religious, or social group. It's a set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution or organization. And then so the question you want to ask is, how do you define your company's culture? If you haven't defined it yet, you should. Is it clear to everyone? Does everyone know what the culture is? And have you eradicated practices, policies, people, and systems that do not perpetuate the culture you want? And have you built in new policies that perpetuate the culture that you do want? So all of your action steps, after you've ideated them and figured out where the commonalities are, then you want to turn them into SMART outcome goals. And then you want to make sure they reflect a shift in the culture. You also want to be sure that each action step centers BIPOC people. So, for example, I brought up the idea of getting rid of our subscriptions at my last organization, because to me, subscriptions are racist. What group of people has enough money to buy a year's worth of tickets 6 months in advance? And what privileges do we offer them? We let them pick their tickets first, their seats first, leaving the very people we say we want to sit in the back and the sides. That's the young, the poor, the Black and brown people. They get the leftovers. And often, to incentivize subscribers, we offer them a discount. So people that have the resources to pay full price are getting a discount on the best seats in the house. So it's not an equitable model. So I said, let's get rid of it. Let's go to like a Netflix model where you pay $20 a month and then you get all access to all the things we offer. And also let's do general admission seating. You can sit wherever you want. Everyone has a chance to sit up front. We do it at the movies. We do it on the bus. We do it at restaurants. Board was like, no, my God, I've had that seat for 20 years. You can't take that from me. If we had focused on those board members that have privilege, then we're not centering the people we say we want. Right? And I know subscriptions are a cash flow model. I still think there's another way to do it. And actually, I did a whole pro forma with my Netflix model, and we would have made more money with that model than the subscription model, because we're not discounting tickets. I'm also not like spending $100,000 on the renewal campaign, because it's automatic renewal. So I don't have to print those damn brochures and do all those phone calls, right? And then most people only buy 2 or 3 shows in the subscriber series. I'm charging them $20 a month for the whole year. So it actually came out to be more money, right? So anyway, anyone wants to know more about that, I'll leave my address and I'll tell you a little bit more about it, because there are better models out there. We just haven't taken the time to invent them. Okay, so the 5 criteria of your racial equity action steps. 1, make changes to existing racist practices and or ideates new anti-racist policy. So again, the brick house metaphor, we want to dismantle all the racist practices and want to build the little anti-racist bricks to build a new house. 2, clearly state what will happen. Make sure it's an action, not a belief. It's an action. 3, define them in SMART outcome goals. Center the needs of BIPOC people, not white saviors ideas. And attempt to change the culture. Those are the 5 things you want to sort of scrub your action steps with. And then here's your plan to build this anti-racist plan. The first thing you want to do is a lot of idea gathering. That spreadsheet, get all the constituents that you want deeply involved in this, just to create ideas, create ideas. Fear of pioneering. We need thousands and thousands and thousands of ideas. Our plan will probably have 30, but in the beginning, we want to get all the ideas. Turn the ideas into SMART outcome goals. Confirm the cultural fit, change, and BIPOC centric. Build the plan. So now that you've done that, now you want to go back to that of, by, for all framework. So now that you have 30, 40 actions, figure out what's going to happen. What is external? And then what is immediate? And what is longer term? What is internal? What is immediate? And what is longer term? And get feedback from the community after you have a good draft. Revise based on the community's feedback. publicly share your plan. Share it, celebrate it, talk about it, do workshops about it, invite people to come to a PowerPoint presentation of it, put it on your social media. Here's what we are doing. Use that plan to recruit new people, right? Make a tracking sheet so you are tracking it on a regular basis. And then quarterly post your plan progress. Here's what we said we're going to do. Here's what we were able to do. We're a little delayed on this action step, so we've moved the time to a different time. Be super transparent about it. And then annually revise and update your plan. All right, that's going to be up here for a minute. We have 6 minutes, but I can stay a little longer. What questions do you have?
Michael, I'm Mary Ellen Hundley with City Opera Ballet in Bellevue, and I'm wondering what you think about, as you talked through this evening, it occurred to me several times that one point that you did make, the fear aspect, wherever that was earlier in your talk.
Yeah, fear of loss.
The fear of loss. I think that maybe not enough has been talked about regarding the fear of loss, because you're trying to move forward with actionable goals. But I do think it's worth thinking about and talking about, because it seems to me that that's where the problem lies, that we need to work on how to, when you talked about, say, the white people being up here and BIPOC people here, you want to move people up, you want to concentrate on people that need to move up to be equal. But I don't think that a lot of white people see it that way. They think that, look, I'm used to the way we've been privileged here and other people have not.
Yeah.
And so that when people come up, they're going to be the privileged people, and we will be, that's a fear that we will have lost our position.
Right.
And that scares people, not that people are against the idea of being equal, but I don't think they believe that they'll get to be equal. I think they fear that they will be lost.
Right. And it's irrational. It's irrational. There are virtually no examples of people of color oppressing white people in this world. It doesn't happen. It's not part of our DNA.
No, I'm not saying it happened, but I'm saying that's what the fear is.
Sure,
I do
sure.
believe that that's what the fear is based on.
I think it's a question of
People need to trust somehow that it won't
be
that way.
It's a question of, to me, it's a question of willingness. So there are a lot of scientists, social scientists, especially in the racial equity world, that say that the loss of power for white people will be similar to the loss of a loved one. And those people will go through the 7 stages of grief, which we can see on TV right now, right? Everything that's happening in the world, we can see it. They stormed the Capitol. That was about the fear of loss, right? So my defining factor is willingness. I will extend someone grace if they're struggling, but they're willing and they're trying to learn. If they're like, I'm not changing, you can't convince me, and then I invite them to leave. And so that's what I will offer you, that if you have people that are not willing to change, those people, if you're an anti-racist organization, those people should be invited to step away. And it may be destabilizing, like you may lose their donations. But to keep them, knowing that they're not anti-racist, is going to slow down your process.
I don't know. I would rather look for a way to help them
if they're willing,
be anti-racist.
Yeah,
so that they can stay. Rather than rather than give up on them.
Right. If they are willing, Mary Ellen, that's the key, willingness. If they're not willing, then you're spinning your wheels in the mud. Like if they're not going to change, If they're struggling, but they're trying, then yes, let's extend them grace. Let's help them. But if they're not willing, it's not worth it. I promise you, you'll be beating that horse for 10 years.
Giving back to the community that gives so much to all of us. And providing a
Other
superior
questions?
experience every
There's one question in the chat. It's from Emma. Thank you for this. What are your favorite examples of organizations that have done this work? Looking for inspiration.
Look at American Alliance. What is it called? American Alliance for Theater and Education, AATE. Try also, you can look at my website, massculturalcouncil.org. You can also look at New Repertory Theater. These are all ones I worked on, so I'm bragging. But yeah, no, we took them through this process, and I'm telling you, the process really works. And I can share. Well, I mean, let me know, Sadisha, if we can share the PowerPoint. We can share that, and I can share some links to some racial equity.
Absolutely, yeah. I will follow up with a thank you email with all the resources and everything else.
Great. Other questions?
Does Maya have a question? Okay.
Yeah, I have a question. So this was phenomenal. You are phenomenal. How do we get a little bit of your time and your contributions to some of the other organizations we serve, nonprofit organizations we serve? Do you do guest speaking? And do we reach out to your agent? What do we do?
Yes, I do. You can just email me directly. I insist on having my grooming team flown out from LA though when you call. So my glam squad has to do my makeup. No teasing. Just email me and I'll help you out.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
No, this is good. Thank you. This is Jay. It's really good. Thank you so much. I have attended a few of these. This is particularly good. Only we have attended one session. It's very practical. It's not theoretical.
Yeah, no, I've learned that there's too many theoretical conversations, that people just need some ideas and how to get started. So thank you, Jay. I appreciate that.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah.
It's Ray from EastHUB. Hello.
Ray.
I get to talk to you all the time, and I learn new things every time I do. So I'm so grateful for your involvement with us and for events that you make possible like tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray.
And we have a question from Erica.
Thank you. It's not, I guess, so much a question. It was just really an eye opener. I'm in Tacoma, so I'm in Pierce County, and we are working on rebranding our organization because of the move that we've had to make. And DEIA is very much a hot topic. And I'm sitting on DEIA committee, and I've noticed that race, the actual race, has never been one of the topics. We're talking a lot about accessibility, how that looks, how inclusion looks, and what have you. But the actual term of race and what that looks like has kind of been a mute topic. So I think it kind of gets blended in with diversity. And it's not, well, it is and it's not. And so I thank you for sharing your information. It's been very insightful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's why I suggested that it's an obstacle to a racial equity plan. Again, it's easier to talk about all the other ways that we oppress each other, and race just gets pushed to the bottom because it's the most deeply embedded and the hardest and the most shameful. And so, we've all been in rooms where we're talking about race equity, and all of a sudden gender comes in or disability comes in, and the focus shifts there and it stays there. So I suggest everyone start with the race equity plan. I saw, Nina, I saw your hand come up a little earlier. I don't want to miss your question.
Yeah, this is just a reminder that I need to follow up to get a virtual coffee with you. But I work for For Culture, which is the local arts cultural funding entity. And so many different questions around what do you think is needed in the funding sphere when it comes to how do we support organizations moving towards their own racial equity. And that's where my mind is. And For Culture is doing its internal work on our own. Like, we have a racial equity team and one of the members, and we've developed this internal toolkit that we hope to eventually be able to share with organizations who are in King County. But I'm just curious, from work at a funding organization yourself, what do you do to help incentivize or get the organization seeking funding from you to prioritize their racial equity work?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. And my friends, I will tell you that I'm in lots of rooms. We can stop sharing if you want. I'm in lots of rooms with other funders, grant makers across the country. And if you are not diversifying, if you're not doing anti-racist actions, you will start to lose, you're going to start losing money from funders. They're all actively talking about this and actively dismantling the philanthropic world. So it is a must, and it's urgent. You're going to start seeing these changes come as soon as this fall. So it's interesting, because I'm glad you asked that, because I'm a state agency. So the laws are against, so I can't give a gift to an organization for just being a BIPOC organization, because the law about discrimination protects white organizations.
Same for culture.
Yeah, so I'm actually trying to figure out ways around that, because I think of arts and culture as a social service, a human service, health and human service. And so I'm actually looking at what we do for food insecurities, housing, healthcare, and looking at the state, all the state agencies that have programs that are specifically for BIPOC people. And I'm using that language to justify what I'm doing in the arts world. So I'm working on that. But the other things I'm doing is that we're providing base level training that we're going to offer free to anyone in the state. The platform that we're building will allow 1,000 people to take these online courses. We're actually building what we're calling a cultural equity diagnostic exam. It's going to be a qualitative and quantitative exam that organizations can use internally to assess where they are in their racial equity ethos. It'll spit out a score, and then hopefully, if I can get this engineered, luckily we have MITs and Harvards up here. But if I can get this engineered, it will also spit out a list of recommendations and actions that they can take. My dream, phase one, is that this is internal document, so they can say, hey, we got this score of 20 for Mass Cultural Council. Ooh, yikes, we need to do some work. The next year, it will be a requirement when you're applying for your grants for the next phase. The third year is the third phase, I'm hoping I can say, if you score less than a 70, you're not eligible for grants. That's the long-term goal for it. The other thing we're doing is we added a question. Well, one, we're adding people to identify their race or culture when they apply, organizations to identify if they're a BIPOC organization or not. We can't attach merit-based bonus points to that, because that would be discrimination, but we can at least collect that information. We're doing a lot of recruiting. So I hired 4 people to literally go out and just recruit BIPOC artists and organizations to get them into our portfolio. And then the last thing we're doing is we have a question now in our grant that say, tell us what action steps you are taking to advance racial equity or intersectional justice. So those are kind of things you're going to see happening in grant making all over the place.
Michael?
Yeah.
Yeah, John Stokes. It says Conrad Lee here, but I don't know what's happening. I've had technical difficulties, unfortunately, but I just want to say that I'm thinking and listening, and this has been very helpful. Will be very helpful. I'm the council liaison, the Arts Commission, Parks Board, and look forward to continuing these conversations.
Great. Make it happen, Mr. Stokes, council member.
Working on it.
I appreciate you. I know there was one other question about landmines. The landmines that I've seen that are deal breakers is when it comes down to money. money. So things like subscriptions, board give gets, ticket prices, and it usually comes from the board. The staff is usually on board, but the board is like, ah. So someday I'll do a workshop with you all about how much I hate the nonprofit board of directors institution, and it needs to be like ripped apart and thrown away. But that's another time. All right, my friends. Thank you all so much. I know that Vanya has some more last minute follow-up. So thank you all so much. We'll be in touch. Use my email, use my phone, use my social media.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michael. And thank you everyone for attending and participating. We just want to let you know that we appreciate your presence and your insights and your input. And we will continue engaging you on our journey as we're transforming the East Side and beyond into a more inclusive and vibrant cultural destination. We want to remind you of the upcoming events in this series, A Lens on Racist Policies in the Arts Community on May 26th, Merging Our Worlds, New Best Practices on August 25th, and Equity is More Than a Word on November 17th. So I think Sadishna has put some information in the chat. You can go and register for all of these today. And as we go through this series, we will continue to manifest the world that we want to see. So those registration links are there. We'd also like to thank our amazing artists, trumpet player Awar Arunga and John Hargrave. Sadishna will post their social media in the chat. And last but not least, we would like to thank Amazon and Facebook for their sponsorship of our Culture Creates Community event series, and Microsoft for their valuable foundational support. Because without them, we would not be able to bring this amazing series to you and do our work at EastHUB. So thank you very much, everyone. And thank you so much, Michael. It definitely was eye-opening. And I love the way that you made it simple in a way, right? Very actionable, very actionable.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much. Thank you all for staying on a bit longer, but I think this was so informative and just, yeah, can't wait for the second one.